Hello, folks. Welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. I appreciate you tuning in. I hope you are doing well and taking care of those closest to you and yourself as well, because you know what? You deserve it. I'm recording this in what I call sleepover mode. It's about midnight on Saturday morning as I'm recording this. It is a rainy night here in New York City. I've got my one desk lamp on, and I'm recording this, and then I'm going to sleep. I think so that I can meet my wife on her way back from Cleveland victoriously, a victorious business trip from Cleveland, which will be celebratory in nature. And this is a celebratory episode of this podcast. This is another in-person one. Slowly but surely, as like we begin to very slowly as we begin to crawl our way out of the pandemic, I'm doing a few more in-person interviews. And this is an episode that was an in-person interview. My guest on the show today is Dahlia Haddad. I met Dahlia doing the sketch comedy show that I'm the tech for, Backdoor Barbecue at the People's Improv Theater. She was a cast member of a show a couple weeks ago, and I was very taken by everybody's performance of that particular show. Wanted to get everyone on. I've heard a few people like Mackenzie and Sunny Outlaw on previous episodes, and Dahlia's the latest. And again, another conversation that a lot of stuff that we ended up talking about I could not have planned for. Typically, when I talk to theater people, and specifically when I talk to comedy people, I have this like idea of what it's gonna more or less contain. But I didn't realize we were gonna have so many crossover interests, such as sports and the like. So it was a very illuminating conversation, and I really enjoyed getting to have this chat and getting to share it with you. In general, the Pit is one of the places that I've found like a growing sense of comedy community coming out of the pandemic, and the reason for that is because what I used to have at the Creek and the Cave in Long Island City before it moved to Austin, Texas, I'm slowly rebuilding at the Pit. And I've been also thinking lately, like, I need to do more stand up in New York. I have done spots internationally, I've done spots out of town, but I need to. And for the longest time, I had been afraid to like regularly do spots or mics, even mics, in New York for fear of the pandemic. And I'm slowly realizing that maybe there's a greater sense of maybe I'm a little bit more free to do that than I think I am. So my plan in the next couple months will be to work on getting some more spots locally here in the city that I live in, so that I can start regrowing that stand-up muscle. And I hope to have a few listeners along the journey for that, and I hope to have some audio to share with you. And so let's get into an excellent comedy conversation. Let's talk to Dahlia Haddad of the People's Improv Theater, improviser, sketch comedian, a wide range of stuff. Just a true delight to have. And if you enjoyed this, you'll probably enjoy other conversations I've had. You can find links to everything related to this podcast and what I do at awesomedisaster.com. And if you wanted to help support the show in a way that does not cost anything at all, if you wanted to subscribe on either Apple, Stitcher, or Spotify and tell your friends that this is a cool podcast worth their time, I would be tremendously appreciative. And thank you all again for being here. And let's talk to Dahlia. And they took me to see my friend his name's Chango. He took me to see the team he follows in Buenos Aires, and they were playing this like big like tournament, like the South American Champions League, and they won 4-0, and it was like the most chaotic, crazy passionate like sports experience that I have ever had. And this is like including like going and seeing like Arsenal in London. Any even like the team I follow in New York. It was amazing. It was so fun.
No, that sounds. Yeah, there is a specific passion with soccer. I also think because we forget that like it is the whole world, like the whole rest of the world.
Yes.
And everyone is into it and just like the youth culture. No, it's awesome though. So I played, but I do think it's funny like the contrasting cultures of
Mm-hmm.
this international hype, electric, huge stadiums, and then also just thinking about how intense the parents of youth soccer players are in the Midwest as like this separate entity. So I feel like every experience I've had with soccer is very intense, but it's just like, is it people crying in the streets or is it like a mother of your rival team running along the sideline with you while you're playing at 11, like
Right.
like yelling at you, which
Oh my God.
yeah.
Oh, I can imagine like dads yelling at refs.
Oh yeah.
All that or like why isn't my kid starting? I pay all this money. That that's what turned me off of sports at a certain age. The other thing that always gets me about soccer specifically is that like for the whole rest of the world, this is like the game of like the working of the people. This is like a working class game, but then in America it is this like super like privileged like money thing because you got to spend all this money to get on traveling teams. And I imagine there's a lot of talent that is going unnoticed due to lack of access.
Yeah, or just filtered into other sports that are more accessible.
Right, or more
And
popular. Like
yeah, it's like it doesn't, you don't see kids playing like soccer, I feel like, as much casually as you do like street hockey or basketball or football. Like there's just I feel like other things that take that place.
Yeah.
But yeah, and super funky.
Yeah. And then because I remember it was the reason I was allowed to play it is because like my parents thought I would get hurt playing like American football.
Oh, I mean, it
back in
makes
the day.
sense. I feel like that's a very valid
Mm-hmm.
caution as far as parenting goes. Because I luckily never messed up any of my knees, which I think is the biggest fear when you're like a teenage girl playing soccer.
Of course.
But I probably have a handful of pretty good concussions, and then also just like ankles and toes and feet, and just I was just a gnarly person from 13 to 17.
Right. You catch a couple of like studs up tackles right to the shin on the side. Oh my.
In
gosh.
college, I got kicked just randomly. Like this girl just missed. Like it was not an injury of someone else's skill. The complete opposite. And I just busted some sort of like, little vein or something in my leg, but it was bruised from my knee to my ankle, and it looked like it was grotesque. Like my professors were like, "You need to cover this up, or like put a compression sleeve on it. Are you good?" And it was just so disgusting. So I do get the inclination to not have your kids just be like kicked and scratched and bit. It was a bit a couple times. Like people are crazy.
Yeah, that sounds right. And did you get to play on grass or were you playing on artificial turf? Because I remember like for the longest time, like the women's teams had like the very subpar facilities, and like having to do slide tackles on turf is very different from doing slide tackles on grass.
For sure. I mean, we definitely played all over, whether it was like quite literally just cornfields and converted farms, also to lovely AstroTurf. But I do think that they become, every sport has its own culture of like the badge of honor stuff. And I feel like there's a level of, these turf burns, like, yeah, like, I'm an outside defender. I slide tackle. Like it becomes this cultural thing. It was not my thing. My thing was I was not as prone to just shredding my thighs, but some people those were the war stripes or whatever they're called.
Sure. Well, I definitely, I don't know if improvisers have the same thing, but I definitely know stand-ups, like you have to take a couple of like really like gut-wrenching flop sweat inducing panic attack causing bombs and maybe force and then face like a vaguely hostile, if not physically verbally audience, and then you're a real comedian. Which is why I like, which is kind of like, I like the sort of going between the both worlds like I do now, because I feel like the sketch people and the improv people, they get along better. There's a better sense of working with others.
Yeah,
in
definitely. Is in between like not only just bombing on stage as a stand-up, but kind of the whole game of velvet ropes, like clubs and busking for different places for time. Yeah, I think with improv, the difference is with stand up, no one else is actually vested in your success. Like
Right.
it's actually a lot of fun sometimes to watch somebody bomb or to get to heckle them. Whereas
Yeah.
in improv, at least the other people on stage, they're not trying to go down with the ship.
Exactly. They're trying to find like a chair to like tie together before they go into the
Yeah.
water, kind of.
Or I feel like also people will just, it's rare seeing an improviser bomb really hard that doesn't kind of inherently put themselves in a backseat
Mm-hmm.
for the show or step off a little bit. Whereas, someone else can step up as a stand up. You don't, there's nowhere to hide,
Mm-hmm.
which
No.
is why it terrifies me. But
Oh, yeah, 100%. So you grew up in the Midwest.
yes, yeah.
Where specifically?
I grew up in St. Louis,
St. Louis, Missouri.
St. Louis, Missouri.
How was that like? Because like have like a vague sense of St. Louis as like a culturally significant city, but I'm not sure what the vibe is.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of vibes. I think mainly the thing is it's just bigger than people expect it to be. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, so you're from the South. And I'm like, no, I'm not from the South. And like, oh, you're from a tiny town. And I'm like, not from a tiny town. Like, oh, you grew up on a farm. So there's a lot of that. And while it's like parts of St. Louis feel super small town, it's very small town, big city. And was my prom after party on an alpaca farm? Yes. But these are different layers of the whole thing. I think it kind of gets that rap of like a great place to grow up, or like this idea of, oh, people leave St. Louis and then come back and raise their, kids there. So I think it is very quintessential Midwest, but it also, I don't know, it also has all the problems of that, all the really speckled, awful history of that, all the stuff. I think the biggest pieces of it now that I think back to are, one, I have realized how chatty I am. And just I feel like being in New York and on the East Coast has highlighted different aspects of it. So one is chattiness, 100%.
Right.
Two is like what I keep in my fridge in my pantry. Like I feel like I have a lot of friends now that like only cook with olive oil or don't keep like sweets in the house. So there's not a lot of snackage. And I just feel like there's always a lot of snackage in my house. There's always chips, and there's always cheese, and there's always chocolate chips, and there's always all the ingredients you would need to make chicken soup or chocolate chip cookies. And so I feel like that exists. And then the sports piece of it, which is I grew up a diehard Cardinal fan. Baseball very much runs that city, and the Rams were there. And then the Blues are obviously still there. But I feel like now being in more comedic circles, it's weird to, like, I grew up around people that knew a lot about sports, and I felt like the theater kid of the sports world. And now I feel like the jock of the pit a little bit.
Sure.
And there's just this level of like, I was wearing some football like sweatshirt the other day. It was like a Total Access like sweatshirt, which is this NFL Network show. And just the amount of completely like just blank eyes and like no one, I don't know. It's just no one, I feel like, and I started quizzing people at some point. I was like, have you ever, not out of like, not to be mean, but just like, does anybody here, has anyone here watched any program off the NFL Network? And I think the answer was no. So I think that duality is kind of fun. I get to feel like what I imagine my brothers felt like as children, like now as an adult.
Oh yeah, no, I completely imagine that. Well, and especially because I feel like being in America and deciding that I'm gonna like soccer, there's also I have that like you're fucking hipster kind of perception. Oh, you're so unique. You know it's called football.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you about sports at the pit.
No.
I don't know NFL very well, but I understand.
Neither do I, and I guess that's the thing is I always felt like, oh, I know the least about this of anyone. And now feeling like an expert on something you know nothing about, there's a certain level of fraudulence, but there's also a certain level of adrenaline that I love, which is like totally playing into it.
Yeah.
I feel like I do that with the Midwest too, where I'm just like the arbiter of what the Midwest is. And it's like, this is not really fair, but it's fun.
Oh, absolutely. And especially like talking about like, because I also love like the culture around sports and my presumptions about the Midwest. I don't know if Missouri plays quite into this culture as well, but there's like the thing I love most about football is that when football's happening, all of the good chicken cream cheese based dips are going to be around.
Yes.
And then the other thing I love is in the Midwest, if there's any kind of like, if you've got a problem with somebody, well, you'll never hear about it from that person directly. You'll hear about it like 2 or 3 people removed. Because I'm from Maryland, so kind of similar.
Yeah.
But and then you can solve that problem with a casserole of some kind.
Yes.
Like a hot dish.
Yeah.
And that's like the UN peace
Yes.
tree. That's like the UN peace talks.
100%. I do. Yeah. Just like what people bring to dinner. I was recently, like when the Super Bowl was happening, I was thinking like, is that a thing for a lot of kind of the new folks I've met? Like,
yeah,
how are you celebrating this day? And a lot of times I'd be like, oh, where are you going to watch, or what are you doing, or what are you making for your Super Bowl party? And a lot of them thought that a reasonable response to that was, oh, I'm not really into football. And I was like, it's not about that though. Like that felt like a non sequitur. I was like,
sure.
It's about the fact that you make buffalo chicken dip and you make pretzels in the shapes of footballs.
Yes.
And you make your veggie tray into the shape of the field. Like that's what it's about.
Yeah.
I never watched the game, but I went to a Super Bowl party every year of my childhood.
And so growing up, you played sports, but you wouldn't have considered yourself like the sporty kid. You would have considered yourself more the theater kid.
My brothers will say it's entirely in my head. We all definitely like played sports and did different stuff. I just felt like I had both interests, and then I had a fundamental level of like Midwest teen angst, which can be really summed up by my Instagram. If you scroll back enough, you'll just see pictures of the Brooklyn Bridge with the caption, "I miss New York," or "Can't wait to live here." Like there was a little bit of like a I'm gonna get out of here angst that I think.
Oh, I know that. I know that feeling.
Which is when it happens to be coupled with an intense interest in musical theater or frequenting, your regional theater black boxes as like a 16-year-old. I think I, maybe more than I was, but I definitely painted this persona of, I was built for the arts. I was built for New York City. I'm going to go there and I'm going to wear turtlenecks. And I'm going to, God damn it, I'm going to do it.
You're like, you had your own arc of glee happening.
Yes.
In your teen years.
Yeah. And then I moved here and I was like, I miss the Midwest. I love casseroles and cheese. Why don't you guys eat snacks? And it was like, well, that's not really how that was supposed to go.
I know, especially like in Park Slope with like your healthy snacks, like your puffed veggies and your chickpea snacks. Sometimes you just want a snack that's going to make you need a nap.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got this. All right, so as a fellow theater kid, what this arc, the next I think important thing of like tracing your through line here, Dahlia, is what shows did you do in high school?
I was only in 2. Because I was cut from the rest of them. I was not a successful theater kid.
Oh man.
I remember like my sophomore year, I auditioned they did the Drowsy Chaperone, and 52 kids auditioned, and the cast was 50 kids, and this one other guy and I were the 2 guys cut from this show, and so and I just found it hilarious, and it ended up being fine, but there was this level of like, I thought I could kind of sign up for this. And now there's a bunch of kids who actually know how to sing and dance. But I ultimately did. I was in Pippin and I was in Urinetown. And so those were the 2 that, were.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
My college did Urinetown, but that was my tech semester, so I wasn't in that one. Pippin I love as well. I feel like Magic to Do is like one of my all-time favorite musical theater songs.
Oh, no way.
I could just sit and jam on that all day.
Yeah.
I still don't know exactly what the plot of Pippin is. It's been a while since I've seen him. I'm still not sure what's going on. So in high school I did the musicals I did because I got lucky, and I was the tall guy, so I did Crazy for You, which is George Gershwin's songs. And I think I got that part because I could pick an upright bass up and play it like a guitar. That was really fun. Singing in the Rain was a good musical. We made it rain on stage.
Oh, whoa.
That was awesome. And then the Pajama Game, where I got to play the mean boss.
Oh, whoa. Very cool. No, I was like, there is something specific about like the are you above 5'9" and a male auditioning for a High School Musical? Like, which lead part would you like? That
I was never a lead. I realized early on in my entertainment career I was going to be a supporting cast, and I excelled at that. But I have to say about that story you were telling me, I think at that point, two more people in the chorus will not make that much difference.
Oh, trust me, I had those thoughts. Yeah, I was like, you can't fit two more people on stage. But I'm also, I don't know. I think that the little bit of had played a lot of competitive sports. It was great for me because I do think there was this level of I will be your star, whether it is now or whether it is in 3 years. I will be your star.
Amazing. I love the sort of like Thanos plotting of.
100%.
I love this. And what position were you playing in soccer?
I was a center mid for a little bit, and then I was a fullback or a center defender.
Defense. Nice.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. I would alternate between fullback and goalkeeper.
Nice.
That's those were my favorite spots. I loved playing goalie.
I
it was so much fun. Like, it was very satisfying to like catch a ball and then like have it like make a sound when you catch it, and all the parents are like, "Ooh." That's very thrilling to me. Is shutting down cocky strikers is very fun.
Yeah. I feel like the psychoanalyzing any youth sport position with the connotations you build around it at 12 is really fun, and how much of yourself you're just like, I don't know, that's who I am. I'm a center defender. I'm loud. I control the field. It's like, wow, like I had an unchecked ego and like a complete love of telling people what to do that someone should have stopped, but instead it was just like
it was encouraged.
Yeah, it was like youth sports of Missouri were like, this is great, you're going to state, kid.
And so you're playing on your school team, and then was that a dream of yours, professional athlete for a little while?
No, I think I always knew that wasn't really in my cards. I thought I wanted to play in college for a little bit, but I was more interested in leaving Missouri than I was finding a school I could play at. And so I think it kind of became a where you could play and where you could go.
Sure. And then of course the goal is like get out of Missouri. No, I know.
Yes, and then feel better than everyone that stayed. No.
I know that feeling too. It's just because I got mocked pretty mercilessly middle school through high school until I started doing theater. So there's definitely part of me that is like, all right, everyone who's still in Calvert County, who's gone into some kind of average job, I have achieved victory over you.
Yeah, no, I really thought I was going to be better than that. And also, I don't really have a reason to feel that way, but it's such a fun feeling to have that, yeah, while I think, people were generally nice, I liked my friends, I was chill with St. Louis, there is this level of when I go home, I just constantly want to wear casual heels and talk about the fact that I live in New York. And it's like, all they are happy for me. And I'm just like, and how's your job at EY? How's consulting? How's mid-level consulting in Missouri going for you? And they're just like, oh, it's really good. I like my job a lot. And I was like, oh, I bet you do. You lived in the same house, like same suburb you grew up in. They're like, yeah, that was always my goal. And I'm like, oh, I bet it was. It's just like, we're both just doing well in what we want. But there's this subtext that I've entirely created, which is, I hate you.
Yeah. No, I've created those. I create some of those narratives. Like you create the sort of like main character feeling for yourself, where you're just like fighting against all odds, and then like when you really think about it, it's like, oh well, everyone was actually kind of like pretty like chill and excited for me, and they it was night. They were happy to see me do well, and and do the thing I wanted to do. Okay, so goal is getting out of Missouri, and are you interested in comedy at any of this point? Because I'm also trying to track, because I didn't know when Mackenzie did stand up until she did the show. So I know you from doing sketch at the Pit, but I'm curious, like, what other comedic and what else was drawing you to comedy, and when?
So I was in an improv and sketch group in college, and so I think that was more, not that I stumbled into one or the other. If I had auditioned and the group was just improv or just sketch, I'm sure that would have been more of a focus. And then when I moved up, I think I just wanted to continue with both of those. And I think it's I want to do all of it and I want to figure it all out. I'm definitely doing more improv now just because I've landed on a team, the new roommates.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's kind of become the focus. Uh, and just finding the time to like do more sketch. Stand up is something that scares the hell out of me. Or like character work.
Mm-hmm.
In theory, I would love to do it, but I think it's just so much easier to invest time and energy and money in like improv or sketch and plugging in that way
Yeah.
than it is to do the kind of lone wolf journey of I'm gonna go hit all of these mics and I'm gonna spend
Yeah.
6 hours on a Friday figuring it out. I've always liked the team aspect of almost anything I've done. And so
Mm-hmm.
while it's a skill that I value and understand I should probably work on at some capacity, it is less like the dream, the what I want to
Sure.
get good at, than improv for sure.
Gotcha. And were you a fan of sketch early on, or how did you find out what improv was? Because I remember gradually having a concept of what stand-up comedy was. Because I remember like watching like Comedy Central stand-up specials. And what is this thing I'm watching? There's just one person
Mm,
talking, and then I remember like getting exposed to like comedy albums.
yeah.
Where I'm from in Maryland, it feels more southern, even though it's debatable if Maryland's the South or not.
But for sure, there's parts of Maryland. Yeah, that's a state that can kind of flip flop. Same with Missouri, but I think
Yeah,
St. Louis is more Midwest.
yeah. So yeah, but exactly, you have these little pockets where it's vastly different culture wise. So of course, I found out very early who like Jeff Foxworthy
Yeah.
was, or at the time Bill Cosby was a parent approved choice. A little
Mm-hmm.
different now.
For
So
sure.
like, what did you? So how did you find out like what improv was? Was it in college? Did you like see improv? Um, was there like a patient zero moment for you?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I I was a big, and still to this day, it's a little bit of a less guilty pleasure, but it was probably the only books I read between 11 and 16 were celebrity memoirs. Like, I
Uh huh.
had no interest in fiction, no interest in sci fi, no interest in anything other than like Tina Fey's life.
Uh huh.
And so I think I always, I liked stand up from a pretty young age. My mom would like sometimes play, albums when we were driving around. And so I
Mm-hmm.
felt like that was something I was aware of. But I feel like when I was in that very figuring out what your sense of humor is kind of middle school era,
Uh huh.
the group of like Second City groundlings, kind of like white hot stars, were really, really firing off. And so I remember like
Mm-hmm.
watching, being, 8 and 9 and watching Tina Fey and Amy Poehler and Seth Meyers and all of them on SNL.
Uh huh.
And then really just being fans of all of that. And then as soon as, that kind of next, you had Vanessa Bayer and Cecily Strong and Kristen Wiig and all those guys, loving all of them, but then reading.
Oh, for a second, I thought that was my doorbell changed
Oh,
very suddenly. That's
sorry, that
hilarious.
was my
Oh, don't worry
phone.
about it. That's I love
Um,
these little organic
oh,
moments
it's my
that
friend
happen.
Megan.
Ooh,
Like,
exciting.
oh, yeah, she's coming in town. She's probably looking for an agenda of
Ah,
what we're going to do. But yeah, so
so
also someone that was in my comedy group.
cool.
But yeah, I was obsessed with all of them. And so I really did, I feel like, spend those late middle school, early high school years reading just a lot about them. And so
Mm-hmm.
I remember being like 15 or 16 and being like, oh, my dream is to like go back in time and be a pupil of Del Close. Like, I was a nerd about
Sure.
it. So it was,
Right.
it
You
was,
had like a working, deep understanding of the intricacies of improv comedy at its formative time.
I think at least I thought I did, which was maybe
Mm-hmm.
the more important piece of that. I have learned in the years since I didn't, I didn't know how to do it. I didn't probably understand the philosophy so much as I knew this is a way to do comedy and be a performer without, which I thought, and it's not exactly the case, but I remember being like, I don't want to be an actress. Like, that feels, one, scary and vulnerable to say.
Mm-hmm.
Two, feels like something you need to like be pretty and able to sing to do. And I felt like I could do, like, it felt like the route of like, oh, I could learn how to do that, or that feels like a skill. It didn't feel like a talent in the same way. And I
Yeah.
think that's what made it feel more accessible. I feel like a lot of like stardom and performance is billed as like you have it or you don't. And I felt like
Mhm.
improv, like everything I was reading was all of these people who were just regular people who wanted to do this thing that learned how to have it. And so I think that was the
Yeah.
piece that I thought was super cool.
Yeah, like it's more of like a trade. Like learning to weld or being a carpenter. Like that approach is like this is something there is a set of tools that are involved in doing it, and they are learnable.
Mm-hmm.
Compared to like this sort of like mysterious, like mystical kind of like, well, you're either like a wizard or not
Yeah.
kind of
And
thing.
it's a
It
lot
makes it more
less,
accessible.
yeah. And it's also like less intimidating to admit you want. Like I think accessible both in terms of you can show up and do it, and
Mm-hmm.
also just it feels terrifying to say, I want to be an actor. I want to be, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to learn this skill is because, yeah, my high school, even college self was like, no, I'm going to go study international affairs and I'm going to be a politician. Like it wasn't something I, would admit and something I definitely thought was under wraps. And then when I got
Mm-hmm.
older and I was like, I'm actually doing a lot of, comedy stuff. And everyone was like, yeah, obviously that's always what you wanted.
Right.
And I was like, so I was not as cavalier about that as maybe I thought I was.
That's amazing. Well, it's sort of like you need like there's like a I think about I would compare this like improv to like punk rock almost. Like if you listen to like virtuoso guitar music, it seems very unobtainable if you don't know what you're doing. But if you listen to like the Ramones or Blink 182, you can be like, oh, I could probably figure out how to do that, and that's really cool sounding.
Mm-hmm.
I feel similarly to improv. Like if you see some good improv, like I remember watching Whose Line Is It Anyway, and like just singing. None of this was planned. That's so cool. Or like going to like theater festivals
Yeah.
and seeing it done. And where'd you go to school?
I went to George Washington in DC.
Oh, okay. So do you?
Yeah.
All right. So well, I know that area very well. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. DC is for. I mean, it feels different to me because I feel like it's kind of always been like sort of right there, but kind of far away from me growing up. DC is a very interesting town. I think I would love to kind of get your thoughts on this. First off, like Northwest versus Southwest, I would get lost driving into the city every single time. And I also feel like the general vibe of the city changes depending on who is the president.
100%.
Like right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a super interesting place. I didn't realize how much more one I knew about kind of politics and what was
Uh-huh.
going on when I was living there because it was everywhere. But also, I went to school and was friends with so many folks who were interested in doing this professionally that I
Mhm.
think it kind of did two things for me, which was one, it really plugs you into the current, environment and culture and the hostilities of that. And I was going to school primarily when Trump. Oop,
Oh, it's all good.
I know. It's like I'm just you can hear how clumsy I am and how much I talk with my hands through the podcast. It's just knocking stuff. Um, I've always been like that. I feel like I'm always
Well,
breaking
again, it's that
glasses.
Midwest
Yeah, and
chattiness.
people like it really. I feel like couch every time I'm talking to a new person in a bar with I'm not that drunk, but I could drop my glass at any moment. Um,
And were you studying politics?
yeah, so I studied international affairs, in
Uh-huh.
the vicinity of not pure poli sci, but so I knew a lot more. A lot of people were really plugged into it, and I think the other thing it did was like I think about a lot. If I had gone to school in New York, I feel like my 20-year-old self would have made a hard pivot to politics and just
Mhm.
wanted to do something that wasn't as saturated. And so I think in a lot of times I went into going to school in DC saying I'm going to do, international studies and I'm going to work for some NGO or go and work abroad or work blah, 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 blah. And that level of within that big school, finding like the 10 other people that really wanted to do improv and sketch
Uh-huh.
felt kind of intimate and cool and like you were doing something different. And I think the intensity of all my friends who were up at 5 a.m. to go intern on the Hill was just not something that was super appealing. And I don't know if it was contrarian or if it was lifestyle or if I was just a night owl and didn't want to be up. But I do think like if I'd went to a school where there were 15 comedy groups and everyone was doing this and we were in New York and like people were studying film and this, like if I would have done it or been interested in like pursuing it after school, or if I would have just been tired of that rat race in the way that I was tired of the political one and just uninterested in it.
Sure. No, almost like it becomes like the norm, like
Yeah.
whatever the norm and the grind is. Like when you're first getting into it, it becomes that like little respite
Mhm.
from that, and especially with like DC like lifer politicos who like are super ambitious.
It's so intense.
Yeah, I know I know the type. I can imagine getting burned out on that like really quick, especially like if you meet some like dude from an Ivy League who's like at like a expensive bistro or gastropub after like a long day. It's just like, oh hey, how you doing? Whatever.
Yeah.
I can imagine that could get really exhausting.
Yeah. There's definitely a vibe where I was just like, I don't want to talk this language. Like I want to be the person in my classes when everyone's like, and what does the current leadership at the World Bank, and I don't know, I think it felt like a tiny bit rebellious, even though it wasn't, and I was a total rule follower. But it was just like, no one knows this, but I'm not going to use this degree.
Exactly.
It was like my parents were like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Why did you go there then? It is so much money."
Well, it's good it's good to know stuff, even if you aren't actively in the field that you're doing.
Yeah.
So like all that plays in. I have examples I could tell you later. So okay, so you're in DC. So like comedy is kind of like the respite from this, becomes this sort of like respite from this like very like fast paced like crazy like ambitious sort of people, and so out of this vibe, New York becomes the goal for I guess a change of pace.
Yeah, I'd always just wanted to move there. My biggest hesitation was probably once I move there, I don't think I'll leave. So is there anything I want to do before I go? And so I spent a long time being like, do I want to go au pair in Europe? Do I want to, go and move to the West Coast? Do I want to backpack around? I thought like, oh no, what if I go there and I fall in love with this place and I never go anywhere else? And then I remember right before I moved being like, that's crazy. You can always still do those things. And then like a month after living here being like, I will never leave. I will die in this apartment. Like,
Sure.
So it totally was what I expected. But yeah, I don't know. I felt excited to be in a big city of a different type and kind of feel like a little fish in a big pond again.
Sure. No, yeah, there's just a certain sort of like energy, and like there's something about like, because to me I think this is like the main stage of like world events, one of the main stages of world events and culture, and like if and that old adage about if you make it here you make it anywhere, like I feel like that is kind of true, because I feel like New York will, and I don't know if this was your experience, but I feel like it'll beat you down a lot, but then it'll give you like a little morsel of amazing things that could not have happened in any other place. And how long ago was that you moved to New York City?
I moved about a year ago.
Oh, so you're relatively new to the city.
Yeah.
Oh, see, I always assume that everyone I meet has just been in New York as long as I have. That's hilarious to me.
Well, I assume the same thing, but I just assume it's a year.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, so it's still pretty fresh. And so I just feel like this first year, I don't know, I obviously, had goals and interests and was going to find work and make it work and do all of that kind of stuff. But I also was like, I can be a little type A. And so this notion of a lot of the things that you are introduced to and discover and meet while you're here are going to drastically change what you ultimately want to do.
Yeah.
And so trying to stay open to that. So just like something little, like being able to, switch jobs and not have to worry about like one thing. It's all of those things that I think make it more possible and then make it a lot harder as you've been here longer and longer to justify whether it's the cost or the energy or whatever it is.
Yeah, when I first got here, I I periodically had many times where other people probably would have left, but I was just like, I can't. It's got it. I have to make this work. And luckily, after a while, it kind of I got my shit together a little bit, and now the artistic stuff is going a lot smoother than when I was struggling and
Yeah.
feeding into that. That's really cool, Dahlia. And how did you find the pit?
One of my friends who was a couple years older than me in school when I moved here said you should really take a level 1 class at the
Mm-hmm.
pit, and she was in my improv group with me, and like a little cocky 21-year-old, I was like, level 1, we've been doing this, and she was like, no, like shut up, like take, there's always something to learn. There's a benefit both socially and then also just in terms of learning a specific place's philosophy and starting at that one. And so I'd been here about a month when I
Mm-hmm.
started my level 1. And then she brought me to a jam maybe after like my third class.
Mm-hmm.
And my class just ended up being a very, very fresh to New York bunch
Right.
and a lot of people that had a lot of free time. And so we would hang out a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so within that level 1, in the 8 weeks from signing up and knowing 2 people in New York to our grad show, I had started going to 2 or 3 jams a week, started to hang out with her around the pit. And then I think right near the end, I was interning and I was nannying, but I kind of just wanted another job.
Yeah.
And I went to Anna, who works as a night manager there. And I was just like, how'd you get this job? She was like, actually, we're hiring, but I can, if you, airdrop me your resume, I'll just send it to the guy who hires. And so by like mid-April, I was working at the pit. And so it happened very quickly. I like just
Uh-huh.
started my level 2 and my class had just come to a different jam a night that I was working, and they're like, when did you? And I was like, a couple weeks ago. So I
Mm-hmm.
just feel like I was like, I want to be around this space. I want to have access to shows. I want to be able to take
Yeah.
classes. I want to get better at this. And I think being in the vicinity of it and it being a little bit more of a flexible job was super appealing. So I just really just stuck myself to that.
Uh-huh.
To that.
Yeah, you did the thing that like my parents would have said. Well, you just walk into a place and you give them your resume, and you're just
Yeah,
like, it
yeah.
doesn't happen like that anymore. But it does
I
still.
guess.
That's very cool.
I
And what?
also was applying to 1,000 other 9 to 5s that I
Oh,
did not get. So it
yes,
was
of
like,
course.
I wasn't trying to hand my resume out. I was just like, I like this place. You work here. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Before I got my current day job, which I love, I really love. I also had a couple of other interviews happening at the same time, and I remember one of them. I couldn't even tell you what the job was, but I just remember the interview. They had like a giant yoga ball or medicine ball that was in like a little holder, and I sat on that. I had to sit on that in like my kind of shitty suit that didn't really fit. I just remember feeling like vaguely violated by the fact that I didn't have like a proper chair.
Yeah.
Like I remember thinking I remember thinking at a certain point like, okay, I'm gonna tank this intentionally. What's like, how can I professionally not get this job? It was so awkward. But no, that's great. Like I remember when I first got to the city and I was like going on the open mic websites, and I found the Creek and the Cave, and then I started going to like, because there was a mic there every single day, and I would go there and I would do these mics and I'd hang out and I'd watch the shows for free. It was sort of like a real sort of kind of like a that was my comedy store in the 80s time.
Yeah.
Is what I like to describe that as. Like I was just meeting all of these great comedians from everywhere around the country. It was just really kind of formative years. So I can imagine like knowing where you're at now, not probably the pit's like not too dissimilar of a thing, because you have access to all these incredible people doing all of this incredible work. That's very exciting.
100%. I think that I was super lucky to stumble into it when I did and as early. And it just happens to be, I don't know if it's a time or if it's always been like that. I can't really speak to it, but just an incredible an incredibly warm group of people and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
folks who are really excited to be working with other, groups and collaborating in a faculty that's pretty wild. And I just felt like, yeah, why fix it if it's not, if it's not broke? I'm learning a lot. I'm seeing
Mm-hmm.
a lot of new things. Um, and yeah, and everyone's really nice. And I know it's one of those places where I feel like 1% of folks there are actually like New Yorkers. Like it is
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people coming in. But I think there was something at that time that was also really comforting about that. Like there was
Yeah.
this sense of, okay, if I'm not gonna feel at home with my DC friends or at home with like my family, the closest group that is at home is other people who are at least new.
Right.
And so yeah, it was this cool bit of this real. I saw like my level 1 crew the other day in Pioneers, which is the bar like right next to the pit.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this idea of we've all, we all have different friends now and slightly more rooted lives and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it was like, oh, like this was the, not safety net, but this was like the home base for the first 6 months I was here. Like you guys,
Mm-hmm.
are so much of dissipating that early loneliness that can very much exist when you move to a new city. And yeah, I
Uh-huh.
think that's what those kind of places are for. And that's why you start at level 1 and you don't think you're hot shit and jump up, is like,
Right.
it's not just what you learn in level 1. It's like, oh, here, other folks from all over that make me feel like I at least have like a pinky toe in this world and in this space.
Yeah, and that's like the kind of hidden value of classes. I think that exists that maybe some people don't think about is it's not just like the information you're getting; it's the people you're meeting, it's the community that you're building. Because I remember for the longest time, like thinking that, specifically with stand up, the stand up comedy classes, like anything was kind of a scam.
Mm.
And then I kind of disabused myself of that, and I took like a voiceover for commercials class.
Oh, cool.
Had learned a lot, even having a theater degree, learned a lot. Got to have my teacher on the podcast, hear some cool stories about working with Jim Henson,
Fun.
get some work out of it.
Yeah.
Like it works out.
Mhm.
It works out. So you have this one improv team. You have this improv team. What else do you have any other shows that you run currently?
No, not that well, I guess a lot of it's been very like, oh, I'll do this. You need someone that does this. I feel like like Shonda Rhimes had her big like year of, I'm forgetting what I used to say about it. If hers was a year of yes or a year of no. But it was this whole big year of boundaries, and I feel like I just say yes to anything all the time. So a lot of this stuff isn't necessarily I'm putting up, but I just am plugging in. But I am doing this other show with Chris Griggs. I'm helping him.
I know
produce,
Chris.
Yeah, produce. It's formerly the Centralia Experiment. Centralia Experiment. I don't know why that sounded wrong in my mouth, but now it's called The Awakening, and it's this very. I think it's. I should know all of this, but it's an improvised dream odyssey, and so there's an accompanist with every show. It's been piano for the last couple, and there's a dance sort that opens it, and there's a lot of props and a very fluid, natural tone to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the coolest thing about that kind of improv, where you have music, for instance, and really intense lights, and you take it very seriously in the way that you dress and the way you prepare for it, and
Uh-huh.
even the way that you just announce the show at that start of it. I feel like the biggest cop out with improv, like it's so easy to just not care and it's so easy to play like everything's a jam and not take anything seriously. And if you're going to look more foolish
Mm-hmm.
not caring than you are caring, then you're going to, you're kind of funneling everybody into the side of
Yeah,
making
yeah.
it matter. And I think that's a really cool show because it's just conceived of, based off of this power group that is very artistic and magical and awesome. And then taking it and saying, how can I get a group of 6 people who maybe have never played together to just take this really seriously? And even in the moments where it's not funny, it's at least interesting, whether that's stage picture
Uh-huh.
wise or musically or something else. And I don't think that's a cop out at all. I think making something more of art and more heightened experience is really awesome. So I'm working on that with him. Mainly, I just send emails for him, but
Mm-hmm.
I do really like the show. So I am happy to be a part of it.
That's super cool. That is an absolutely valid point. If you can't be funny, be interesting. That is one of the rules one of Bill Hicks's kind of like rules of comedy that's on the wall. I think at the Laughing Skull in Atlanta.
Oh, okay.
One of them is if you can't be funny, be interesting. And I love that. Like when it comes to storytelling shows, I love going to like a comedic storytelling show, like a Moth or something like that, StoryCorps or something like that, because it's like a very immediate like form of like human understanding.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense. The same way I feel like improv kind of forces you to kind of let go of a lot of stuff. I feel the same way about storytelling.
Yeah, again, because it's that core of like it matters, and it's not like yeah. I think a lot of people, whether they know it or not, it's like, oh, if you can't be funny, you know, be an asshole is a little bit kind of the on stage like thing that you can get into with jams. It's like, oh, if you can't be funny, don't care. If you can't be funny, be too cool for it. But I think this level of like, if you can't be funny, yeah, be interesting. And when you have things like the Moth, like someone is telling you something that is of importance. They are saying, I worked on this. I like workshopped it. This is not probably the first time I've said these words out loud. And I think that there's, again, it's scarier to say, I really care about what I'm showing you. It might be bad than it is to say, I just walked in, said some stuff. If it was good, it's all gravy. And it's like, no, like you can care and it can be made up.
Yes. I find radical vulnerability to be like truly like edgy and intense per performance. Not so much compared to what like people on the internet would describe as like edgy comedians or what have you, but like just really like being intense, allowing yourself that vulnerability, and especially like in like if you're, I don't know if you've ever had the moment when you're in a scene and you're just kind of like, you don't exactly plan, you obviously couldn't plan for the moment that you're in, but suddenly you're in it and you're just kind of like, well, I got to keep ending and accepting. Let's just see where it goes. That's something like once you, and I'm talking based on my idea of improv because I don't do it very often. But if you can like get past that self-conscious hurdle and just kind of like let what's happening happen, that's where magic happens.
Yeah. Do you have any, like when you think of that, like do you have stand-ups or improvisers who you have clocked as, oh, the way they do vulnerability is really interesting to me?
Do I? That's a really good question. For me, and I'm thinking about it right now. Mark Maron as a stand-up, I think is when he does comedy, he really he is not afraid to get like very vulnerable. Like I just watched his new HBO special, and he does an entire chunk about his girlfriend dying, like Lynn Shelton's passing, and it is it is like so like immediate intense, and he's being funny along the same way.
Yeah,
he's like, it was the worst thing that ever happened to me, and probably her too. It's just like those little asides. There's another great one, and he's a little bit more of a controversial figure, but Doug Stanhope's stand up, he has a special where he, for about, I think it's about a 20-minute long bit where he describes his basically him participating in his mother's assisted suicide. And
interesting.
It is, and he's known for kind of being like a confrontational kind of like, yeah, whatever, kind of meaning, but he's describing the situation, and then like the jokes along the way and the things that she was saying as she's like, basically overdosing on painkillers, and it's so insanely compelling. And then like the punchline, like, and then the punchline that hits at the end of the story comes completely out of the left field because you're just so wrapped up in what's happening that you've completely forgotten about the callback that's happening.
Yeah. It takes a lot of skill to do that.
It is one of most comedians will highlight that bit as a really just legendary piece of material. That is like, I guess maybe a certain generations like the Machine story, or like George Carlin's 7 Words, that kind of thing. Do you have any performers or improvisers like that for you?
I mean, I feel like there are people around the pit a lot that if I'm just like at a jam or in a show where I'll just sometimes clock, someone taking a cool I don't know. I think that there's definitely big moments like that, and then little ones that I find really interesting, or it's just so easy at a jam for everyone to throw everybody under the rug or to just make,
Mm-hmm.
things kind of I don't care. And so rather, obviously, there's the big examples, but I just think when you see kind of like someone who's earlier to improv or newer at it, and I would definitely include myself. Like I'm not sitting here like on some mountain being like the new people. It's like no, I know I'm one of them,
Mm-hmm.
but watching someone like deal with someone throwing them under the bus by really trying to figure it out or really staying grounded in a moment or just like being in class with people who do that, I think
Yeah.
that a lot of what I'm consuming right now is like among my peers, and I'm just like, what do I want to steal? Like what can I steal? You know what I mean? Like you can't steal the greatest bits of all time, at least not out of the
Mm-hmm.
get. But there is this level of like, oh, like I have never thought of that as like a way to ground this sort of anger, or this sort of negation, or this sort of
Yeah.
that. And so I feel like it's just like that's why I like being around it in a mass volume. It's just like really just to steal people's
Yeah,
stuff.
it's like what can well, again? It's like what can I learn? The same way, like again, I hate coming back to like trade ideas, but there's usually like a hard way to put something together and an easy way to put something together. So you learn. It's like seeing the easy way, like oh, I never thought to approach it like that, and
Yeah.
then those all become parts of your process.
Yeah.
They all become like little bits in the toolbox. You just consume as much as possible, and then you keep the good parts or stuff that really resonates with you.
Oh, for sure. I feel like someone told me in high school once, they were like, oh, if you want, like, never borrow like something from another artist, like steal as much as you can until you make it your own kind of vibes. But
Mm-hmm.
if you're too cautious with it, you're not actually going to learn from it what you'd like to.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think and again, because improv, it's all made up and you have a lot of reps to figure it out. Like I
Mm-hmm.
will fully, just say, I'm just going to try and do exactly what they did
Yeah.
because I feel like you can do that more in this. It's like, oh, for me, surprise, I feel like one of the bigger things I end up taking away is, oh, look how much your silence said, or look at that object work, or look at all the other ways to diffuse something that aren't negotiating with someone on stage.
Mm-hmm.
And those kind of things, yeah, it's great. It's like, fold a shirt, dig a hole, do whatever you got to do to not talk for 12 seconds
Uh-huh.
on stage.
Yeah, and then just like being comfortable in those silences, like
Mhm.
because, and I feel like when you're newer, silence is very scary, and then once you do a couple shows where there's silence and you live, you survive it,
Mhm.
you learn not to fear it as much.
Yeah, and I think that's why you also have to watch it. Like I think even
Mm-hmm.
when you're in a good silence on stage, it can feel excruciating. And then you see someone really skilled navigate that and you're like, "Oh, that was actually really interesting or really sweet or really
Uh-huh.
paved ways for there to be other elements in the space."
Mm-hmm. I love watching that in stand-ups where I see someone like introduce a premise and you can hear the crowd go like, and then they just they like basically like jump over all the invisible lasers and then they grab
Yeah.
the priceless diamond of the laugh. That's I also like from an educated standpoint. I like watching that dance as well.
Yeah. I really like that explanation of it because that is totally it. It's like,
It really
oh, by
is.
the way, I've thought all the thoughts you've thought.
Yeah.
And then I thought of the way that it's funny at the end. Yeah, I find stand up super when I first moved, well, I find it super impressive. That was the end of that thought.
Hmm.
But when I first came and had just a lot more time on my hands, I would just be going to open mics just to watch that had like 4 people there. Like I was the one audience member at all of these random things, but to the point where I was probably going to 2 or 3 shows a week for
Hmm.
like 4 or 5 months. And it's another one where it's like, this is where I have to check myself. It's like, okay, can you not do the open mic lifestyle or are you still afraid of it? Because you were going to 4 open mics a week. You just weren't saying anything.
Hmm.
Which I have to ask myself. But yeah, I think it's awesome. I really, really like actually watching people that are new to stand up and then getting
Hmm.
to watch them again at the same places and figuring out how people are adjusting their sets even more than I like going to see someone's perfectly curated 30 minutes.
Uh-huh. Yeah, just kind of that working out process is also
Yeah.
very. It's fun to watch in a completely different way than the final product is. sometimes. And how are you with sketch? I know you did the backdoor barbecue,
Yeah.
which I'm amazed. I can't. I feel like I just met those guys, and we've been doing shows for a very long time.
No, they're a really
cool.
great group.
I love those dudes.
Yeah. No, they're shout out those guys. I've definitely done less sketch being here, and I think that was honestly a show where I was like, oh, I really miss this. Oh, these are the pieces of it I like. At this point, it just feels like a slightly bigger lift to put together and produce a sketch show, just in terms of rehearsal and writing. And you can't just say, oh, you're a great sketch person. You want to meet 12 minutes before our show and then do it together like you can with improv.
Right.
So I feel like right now it's a time and where I'm putting my resources thing, but definitely still, trying to write stuff, trying to do the thing.
Super cool.
And then see if they're, I know I've had a couple friends putting together different kind of themed sketch shows and being like, hey, like, what do you need? Do you need someone to write? Do you need someone to just show up and memorize lines for you? Like, is there any way I can plug into this as more?
Yeah.
I feel like the game I'm playing right now, rather than this is my, sketch show and this is what it looks like.
Yeah.
But I do, my other favorite thing about working at the desk at the pit, or when I used to work really consistent hours there, is all the classes that used to happen in the lobby that I felt like I would just get to take for free. So I would just like listen to the sketch classes and listen to the building this vocabulary of oh, this is this kind of thing. And people are like, oh, you do a lot of sketch. And I was like, no, it's just Sean Christian Taylor's level 1 curriculum.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
I gotta get him on the show too.
Yeah.
Well, another one. So Mike from Backdoor Barbecue, he's gonna do. I think he's gonna do a late night writing workshop. That I was very intrigued by, because I've watched him over multiple years. Because the news bit has always been in the show. So watching him write stand-up jokes essentially has been I've always very invested in how he does that segment does. So that could be something worthwhile too, because I think, because I feel like with that specific format, with the news or a late night writing kind of format, it's more, there's more of a form to it than stand-up is. So I feel like it's less like just you're charging against the 300 in Thermopylae alone. There's again talking about community, and especially community around the pit, might be worth something. I'm gonna plug it here as well, because I'm interested too.
Yeah.
So something else I like to ask, and I've very much been enjoying this conversation, so I appreciate that you coming over. I don't do a ton of in-persons lately.
Oh.
So this is the first in-person, I think, since Christmas, when Paul was on. I like to manifest, come up with ideas and stuff on the show sometimes. We got improv, we're working on sketch. What is something that you would really like to create and see come to fruition, whether that be a show or a tour, anything, what's kind of I want to make this someday thing?
Okay, what do you have a time frame on someday? Is this by next year? Is this
Just
a forever thing?
Just whenever. For me,
Okay.
for the longest time, I wanted to write and record my acoustic EP, and I was able to do that last year.
Oh my gosh, you'll have to send that to me.
I will.
That's really exciting.
Absolutely.
Oh wow.
So maybe there's something like that for you.
Okay, well, I have a handful of them. I will share a few, and they're
Fantastic.
different levels of, I think a lot of podcasts that are talking about comedy and stuff. I find it funny that I'm all the ones I listen to, people these are the things I've done, and I feel like when I'm sitting here, I'm just here are the things I'm afraid to do. It's a much different vibe, but yeah, things I would like to do. SoloCom is coming up at the pit, and I'm out of town for that this year, but I feel like that kind of sparked I would really like to do some sort of be able to have a 20-minute kind of set of solo performance, but a mix of I really like musical comedy stuff. I also feel like I really like characters and storytelling and stand up. I think that I want to make myself do more stand up so that that can kind of inform what that would look like. But I do feel like I've been really wanting to do a 20, 25-minute kind of solo-y cabaret on the theme of all the times in adulthood that I've shit my pants. because
Okay.
like I feel like I have shit my pants more than most adults, and they're just fun stories for me to get to tell. And I was like, oh, I would really like to do a show that's just based on that. Be fun. Um, so
Amazing.
that's one. The second is um so shorter term than that. I want to have some more character sets, but
Hmm.
just to inform the different versions of myself that have shit her pants. So again, that kind of feeds into the big one. Um, I want to obviously be the lead singer of a Kiss cover band one day, but I've not taken any steps to do that. Um, and then I think I would really like to, and I think this awakening stuff is super cool, like work on producing a very, very like physical improv show in
Uh-huh.
something that is just as like physically performed and acted and danced and moved as it is spoken, and kind of looking at um like exploring. I'm not a huge necessarily sci-fi person, but
Hmm.
I do love like Miss Frizzle. So I feel like there's like in the world between the Magic School Bus and sci-fi, like I feel
Uh-huh.
like it's like a explore the world in a Miss Frizzle way, which is like a much more localized sense. Like I don't want to explore the
Yes.
universe. I just want to like fly into someone's ear in an improv set. But I feel like a very like slightly more narrative, like mono scene people like adventure like
Hmm.
show is something that I think could be really dope to
Interesting.
produce.
I'm
Yeah.
almost imagining like an improvised like kids science show.
Oh, well,
Like
now that's another thing on my list.
yeah, that's the first thing that came to my head. Like basically like a suggestion based like Mr. Wizard or Beekman or Bill
Ooh, that's better than
or
my idea.
or Bill Nye.
Yeah. I also definitely spent a lot of my childhood wanting to be Bill Nye. So,
Uh-huh.
and I'm a nanny who is just passionately in love with the child she babysits, who refers to him as my own kid way too much. So I do think, yeah, the world of working with kids is super, super exciting. And I think just such a, it's, improv is such a cool, you don't, need anything to do it, but it's like any way you
Mhm.
can kind of put magic and creativity into somebody's toolkit when they're young and impressionable and learning how to explore their feelings, I think is super, super powerful. Super lucky for those who get to be exposed to it.
I know. It helped me. It helped me for sure, and I think for anyone who did have that experience it helped them absolutely. Like you need a little bit of wonder.
Yeah,
Because that tempers like the cold bleakness of reality.
for sure.
You know,
Yeah.
the I'm hip to what you're putting down. The, well, I can't wait to see all this stuff come to fruition. If working on like a solo comp thing, like the storytelling open mic scene and the storytelling show scenes, are all super supportive, like and very like generous, not only with like minutes on stage, but just as far as like just a group of people that will lift you up while you
Interesting.
figure that out. There's one my friend David runs at the Astoria Bookshop that's not
Oh,
too far from here.
okay. One, you'll have to send those to me because I am super interested in that. Two, would they be open though to most of my content being about shitting my pants?
I feel
If
like
I'm like, I am interested in it being like serious and also funny and a bunch of fun stuff. I mean, it's giggly, but it's
yeah,
not like,
I
it's
think you
not as
could.
personal.
I think you could do just about anything as long as you didn't go full alt right. That would probably
Oh no,
be
no, there's
fine.
no,
I'm
there's.
kidding. I'm kidding.
Imagine if I was like, well, it's just about the relationship between me shitting my pants and my Republican awakening. No, it's like no, it's
I feel like that just put that out. That probably is going to exist now.
no,
Um,
no, nothing to do with my
ama-
political world.
amazing, amazing. Well, because again, there's also that background. So I imagine mining like sort of like the machinations of like international relations would provide some very interesting fodder as well.
Mm, there's so
Um,
much. There's
yeah,
so much.
I got so many ideas. I got so many ideas for you. We'll work out the percentage later. Um, is there anything we can plug before we get out here?
Oh, sure. New Roommates have shows Saturdays at 9 p.m. at the Pit. You can find us on Instagram at the New Roommates. If you're also just looking for, a fun new friend who really likes, cider and going and watching different various low stakes stand up sets, you can also just follow me and just hang out with me. Yeah, my Instagram's at the Dolly_llama.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Excellent.
so I'll just plug myself, I guess.
Very well. That's sometimes you're worth it. That's what you got to do sometimes. I also like cider, so that's always exciting.
Okay, great. Never mind. Actually, nope. I don't need any new friends. I found one. You guys can all back off.
Thanks for doing this. This is really fun.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that is our show for today. If you want links to anything related to Dahlia and what she's got going on, you can check the description below. If you enjoyed this podcast and know a friend who would be interested as well, you guys are my biggest advocates in letting other people know about the show. You can send them to awesomedisaster.com. That has links to everywhere you can get the podcast, including Apple, Stitcher, and Spotify. If you can subscribe and let other people know that this is a cool podcast worth listening to, that'll really help the show out as well. Learn that new subscriptions are a thing on Apple Podcasts specifically. So smash that subscribe button, as the kids say. And you can follow me on Twitter at ComicWillCarry, at WillCarry23 on Instagram, and at ComicWillCarry on TikTok. And if you want to go a little bit further and support the show, you can go to our Patreon, patreon.com/awesomedisaster, as well as our merch store, which you can also find at awesomedisaster.com. I'm going to turn out the light pretty soon and head off to bed, and I hope that you rest easy wherever you are in the world, and that positive things and solutions are at the forefront of your mind in the future. So that's something that I strive for, and that's something that I get when I have really fun conversations on this podcast like I did today. So as always, I appreciate you all for being here, and I will see you next time between Awesome and Disaster. Stay safe, wear a mask, get vaxxed and boosted, stomp out fascism. Take care, everybody.